long-term impact of Trump's tariffs on American influence in the world. Michael House is co-chair of the International Trade and Transaction Practice of Perkins Coie. Hello, Michael.
Hello, Robert. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me. So, Michael, we've been heard a lot about the immediate impact of the Trump tariffs on U.S. importers and exporters, but I'm wondering about the long term. Like, how do you see Trump's trade policy impacting American companies and the United States' overall position in the international trading community going forward?
Well, this is certainly a very fundamental change in the U.S. government's position toward its trading partners. We haven't seen this major shift, certainly nothing close to this magnitude, uh, perhaps since the 1930s. And if we take the long view and we look back to our world trading system, it was really born in the post-war era after the experiment of high tariffs in the 30s proved to be a disaster for the US economy, quickly overshadowed by the war. But in those post-war years, we had a global consensus among at least the major trading partners of the world to establish a rules-based, free trade oriented system governed by the originally the GATT and now the World Trade Organization, the WTO. I think that entire framework is being tested very dramatically with what the U.S. Government and this White House has rolled out just in the last several months. We're talking about testing sort of the fundamental assumptions of what a world trading system really is. The U.S. has always been at the forefront of that. So this administration's positions on trade are a significant departure from every prior administration, whether it's Republican or Democratic administrations. This is an administration that has walked away, I would say, from some of the basic principles that governments across the world signed on to in under the GATT and in the Uruguay round in the mid 90s.
Yeah.
And so we see the U.S. having had been a champion of those principles over those years, and certainly the WTO was pushed quite hard by the U.S. government, that kind of system to be put in place.
Sure.
And we now see the U.S. government at least taking a position of an isolationist approach, one of abandoning in some significant ways, I would say, some of the key pillars of the WTO structure, and that has to have a weakening impact on U.S. standing in the minds of what had long been its major trading partner
Yeah. Do you think if
allies.
we're no longer driving the free trade philosophy around the world, will that tempt other countries to make new trading arrangements among themselves that exclude the U.S. be left out?
Yes, I think that's a distinct risk that we face. I think we've already seen some movement. Certainly, Europe is in a very important position here in regard to its relationship with the U.S. and its relationship with other major economies, particularly in Asia. And we do see discussions ongoing in the EU about what's the best way forward for that trading bloc to enhance its position vis-a-vis other countries. It's not waiting for the United States, and neither are some of the other major trading partners historically that we've had. Japan and Korea occupy, South Korea both occupy a very important position with regard to trade in East Asia
Hmm.
and specifically China, and two long-term allies of the United States that now have to forge their own way to some extent if they can't find a way forward with this president through some type of agreement.
Yeah, and it's hard to separate trade from other geopolitical concerns. So I'm wondering if we withdraw from the trading community, or at least the philosophy of free trade, does that also weaken our position geopolitically, our influence around the world in a larger
Yeah, and
sense?
the U.S. Right, the U.S. is facing trading partners, dealing with historically close trading partners in two, very different theaters in terms of geopolitics. You've got
Mhm.
the European area, and specifically the conflict that threatens Eastern Europe uh, and perhaps NATO itself going forward. And then in Asia, of course, you have the role of China in the world and its increasing strength and increasingly explicit claims to territory and uh,
Yeah, in the
persuasion
South
around
China Sea problems there.
South, yes, the South China Sea in particular, right? So uh, I think each administration up until this one had seen, and again, regardless of party, had seen a rules-based system uh, engaged very closely in with allies like Japan, Korea, the EU, the UK, as part of a larger geopolitical system that enhanced the values of Western democracy and democracies, enhanced the values that most of the countries like ours
Mhm.
share.
Yeah,
And in Asia, that was you know personified or exemplified, I should say, in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was uh, before the first term of President Trump was very far along in coming to fruition as a regional trade agreement among all of the major Asian economies and the United States, minus China.
yeah.
Of
And
course,
now we
Trump
have the replacement, the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, 12 members of which the United States is not one.
is not one, and so
Yeah,
now we're on the outside looking in Asia there in terms of how our allied economy countries are dealing with their trade and the balance of power, frankly, in that part of the world.
yeah. Wasn't the WTO kind of on life support anyway before this? I mean, there doesn't seem to be any enforcement mechanism currently in place. Is the WTO relevant at all these days?
Yeah. Well, I've studied and taught the WTO law for a long time, and I do have to say it is at its greatest threat today
Mhm.
than we've ever seen since it came into to being in 1995. And uh, I wouldn't say that it's on life support. I think that perhaps is too strong. There are a lot of parts of the WTO that remain quite functional, and it does remain a body that provides a venue, a structure for trading partners around the world to sit down and discuss their their concerns, their disagreements. The fact that the appellate body is non-functional does certainly eliminate uh, meaningful and enforceable dispute resolution in that body, which was a key uh, uh, improvement to the world trading system that the U.S. championed
Mhm.
in the Uruguay round before the WTO was created. But beyond dispute resolution and enforceable decisions out of the DSU process there, I do think that the WTO gives still a venue for and a method and a process for countries to sit down and discuss their concerns and differences. And that's so critically important. If we stop having means to talk with one another, even and maybe especially those trading partners who are completely at odds with us in our outlook, if we lose that opportunity, then I would say we're on life support. The trading system is
Yeah.
on life support.
Well, I'm wondering if our future in the United States lies in bilateral trade agreements or in the case of the U.S. Mexico Canada agreement, trilateral agreements. That's up for renegotiation next year. Can we hope to see that continue and stand?
Yeah, I think that the U.S. Mexico Canada agreement and going back to the NAFTA, it's been a part of our country's particular trade policy for a very long time, even predating the WTO. And I think that's here to stay. How that gets renegotiated over the next 12 to 18 months is difficult to predict with any certainty. We'll see the U.S. Want to take some aggressive positions in reshaping some of its provisions. But I do think it's here to stay, and the as you know, the industries that rely on supply across North America have done so under this framework for so long. It would be so detrimental to U.S. industry to walk away from the North American free trade experiment. Now, where the U.S. Can and perhaps may reach out are bilateral opportunities with other countries. There's already not a full free trade agreement, but the start of some outlines of free trade with Japan that hasn't fully come to fruition. The
Mhm.
U.S. reached a free trade agreement some years ago with South Korea.
Mhm.
So there are avenues for the U.S. to to build on that and enter into agreements that allow for productive free trade between our country and those countries.
Yeah.
The area of the world I would say where that is less far along is, of course, Europe, one of our major trading partners. The EU certainly a lot of different agreements with the EU we have, but not something that would allow for the kind of comprehensive uh, uh, flow of trade that we really should be looking
What
for.
about a bilateral with the UK post-Brexit?
Yes, yes. Well, the UK situation is obviously has changed dramatically since Brexit, and it may be that the U.S. and the UK have enough of a basis to enhance that relationship in ways that where progress can't be made as quickly with the remaining EU
Yeah.
countries.
So, with virtually all of the country's major trading partners now affected potentially by the Trump tariff policies and the uncertainty that comes with the fact that things seem to change on a day-to-day basis, is there anything that companies can do to protect themselves right now, or do they just have to ride through, get through the storm?
It's difficult. I don't think there's a magic bullet to protecting oneself or navigating through this with no adverse impact. I think everyone in the business community, everyone up and down the supply chains of virtually every sector are going to have to ride this for a while. But in the process, uh, it does make sense for companies to keep a very close watch on what some of the trading partners of the U.S. are doing and might be able to accomplish in the way of agreements over the next several weeks or months. And we will know more, I think, in a few weeks down the line here about the scope of those agreements, how a country like Japan or South Korea might be able to shape a trade relationship that's beneficial to both them and the U.S. But there is still at this moment uh, quite a bit of uncertainty. I think the one thing that's and maybe the only thing that appears certain is that there will be a tariff floor that likely won't go away. So
Mhm.
the new administration has built up now a tariff floor of at least 10% that I don't see disappearing at least during this president's term.
Yeah. Well, Michael House of Perkins Coie, thank you so much for joining me today to kind of put into perspective just how the United States is likely to be affected in the long term by the Trump tariff policies and how companies might react going forward. Thank you again for being with me.
My pleasure. Thank you.